This is the Light of Truth radio broadcast with Michael Boldea.
All right, welcome to the program, and thank you for joining us. This is the Light of Truth radio broadcast. I am your ever humble host, Michael Boldea, and it's good to be with you once again. Well, last week was a little different. It was interesting, but today is a new day. And here we are back in the office because I did not want a repeat of last week, even though some of you enjoyed the barking. I particularly did not, because it breaks your train of thought. It doesn't matter how focused you are on something. If there's an animal barking right by you, it kind of breaks your concentration. The thing of it is this, though. I was telling Gino when I got into the office. The moment I logged off, the moment we ended the program, she went back to her normal, calm self. It was so uncharacteristic of the dog to bark for 40-odd minutes continually that I also noticed when she stopped barking. And it was right when the program ended. I know some people are going to make inferences. Some people are going to think there's a correlation there. But I thought I'd share it with you. So because I don't want to go through that again, unless the dog is out for a walk with somebody, we will likely be recording these from the office, which is perfectly fine with me. It's a gloomy day here in Wisconsin, but it's better than what they were prognosticating. I know, it's a big word. They were saying today we were going to get some 11 inches of snow. It's April 2nd, by the way. And 11 inches of snow seemed like a bit much. Now it's just drizzle. So we'll see how the day pans out. But unless somebody prefaces it with "Thus says the Lord," it's another reason why not to trust prognosticators. People say things that don't come to pass, and then they excuse them in various ways. But God knows the truth of it all. God sees the truth of it all. And it would be wise for each of us as individuals to make sure that when we stand before him, we do so with clean hands. The war is still ongoing. No, I did not see the speech last night. I was asleep by the time it aired because the previous night I woke up like at 1 o'clock in the morning. It was a little windy. The wind woke me up, so I came downstairs and did a little bit of writing. So I needed the rest because I want it to be bright-eyed and bushy-tailed for today's broadcast. But I got the gist. Now, whether it turns out to be true and we'll be out of the region in 2 to 3 weeks, that remains to be seen. I'm watching both sides. And by both sides, I mean the big orange man and whoever the current leader of Iran, who has yet to be blown to smithereens, is this week. And it reminded me, if you've ever seen two old men pretending to fight, that's sort of what it reminded me of. Neither of them want to get bloody. Neither of them want to really throw fists, but they're circling each other. And each of them are making more, blusterous remarks. During or after the big orange man's speech, the Iranians came out and said they vowed to disgrace and humiliate and cause Americans much regret. Well, you can have all the intentions of in the world, but you have to be able to back it up. Now, there's been a lot of threat by the regime. I think the one thing they haven't threatened is the one thing we should be cautious of, which is attacks within the borders of the U.S. and other allied nations by individuals they've had here for quite some time. The modern verbiage is sleeper cells. Oddly enough, they never mentioned those. They boasted about a 1 million man army that is ready to rebuff the U.S. I'm highly skeptical of that number. I don't believe there's a million IRGC soldiers ready to go toe-to-toe with some of the most prepared and well-equipped individuals on the planet. But if it were true, then pray tell, Gino, you could mute your mic. Thank you, because there's noises. Again, see, it was just a friendly reminder because you're so hard on Gino. No, we're men. All right. Men speak to each other and react to each other in a certain way. We're not sensitive. We're not girls. When I make a mistake, I own it. Last week, I owned it. I recorded at home. My dog was barking, mea culpa. When Gino makes noises that are suspicious, that people don't know how to interpret, whether sniffling, paper rustling, whatever it is, I just say, hey, mute your mic. I didn't get up and go and cane him. This isn't Singapore. So, we're friends. Me and Gino have been friends for longer than some of you have been alive. So, again, the sensitivity level needs to whittle down just a little bit. Because, anyway, explain to me, because I do want to finish this thought because it is important, how it is that if the Iranian Revolutionary Guard has a 1 million-man army ready to go to war, why it would be that they are forcibly drafting 12-year-olds into the military forces. 12-year-olds. So, again, don't believe everything you hear on both sides. I think that this administration is trying to put the best light possible on the situation. The Iranians are doing what they're doing. But the end result will tell the tale. Now, as a starting off point regarding the 12-year-olds being forcibly drafted into the Iranian army, I was having a conversation with a friend a couple of days ago. And it was a friendly conversation. And he's not really into the whole geopolitics. He doesn't understand what's going on in the world. He's a normal human being by and large who goes to work, comes home, kisses his wife and kids, pays the mortgage. And let's see, in 9 days, I guess, pays his taxes, like we all should. I do as well. And he wanted to pick my brain and asked if I could explain the difference between Israel and the surrounding nations, and do it in such a way where one was deemed more moral than the other in this thing. So it wasn't anything to do with the scripture. It wasn't anything to do with covenants. Just from a purely human standpoint, he wanted to pick my brain to see how I saw and rationalized what's going on. And the best thing I could come up with between a nation like Israel and many of the theocratic Muslim nations that are surrounding it is that a death cult will forcibly draft 12-year-olds into the army, give them a gun, and point them in the direction they want them to go. A death cult will strap a suicide vest on a toddler and send them in the middle of a crowd, while a civilized nation has every right to defend itself and defend its borders. We have to remember that the instigating factor of what's going on today, by and large, I'm not talking about American involvement, but just what's going on in the region, is that there is one nation of some 10 million people that are constantly being told they're going to be wiped off the face of the earth. They have to take those threats seriously. Because I know it's been such a long time, but October 7th, a couple years ago, I think was a rude awakening for a lot of people that thought it was just bluster. I think it was a rude awakening for people that thought, well, they're just big talkers and there's no action. So that's the difference. A death cult, by definition, has no empathy, has no emotional involvement in the protecting or the protection of the innocent, of the young, of those that don't know why their dads and uncles are always walking around with AK-47s talking about, death to America. So let's not pretend they're the same. I know that there's a big push to whitewash the whole thing. Oh, they're all the same. Nah, I'm sorry. Do a little research on what Islam truly stands for. Not the propaganda that's been foisted upon the world about a religious of peace. We just want to be left alone to love our goats as we love our children. No, let's not. Now, there's something that happened last night, actually. And it's something we discussed a couple of weeks ago, I think. And that is the unwillingness of supposed allied nations, especially in Europe, to be seen as supporting or validating what America is doing. The most recent thing that I ran across was that now Austria is blocking U.S. warplanes from using its airspace. Never mind that they're unwilling to commit to the defense of an ally. They're now blocking warplanes from using its airspace. I think Italy did the same a couple of days ago. And if you're wondering why, there's another article I came upon that should shed a bit of light on the position a lot of the European leaders are in. Austrian president, the president of the same country that yesterday blocked U.S. warplanes from using its airspace, has come out and said that all women should wear headscarves or burqas in solidarity with Muslims to fight rampant Islamophobia. Look, a lot of these nations have already been conquered. They're just pretending it's not the case. A lot of them are keeping silent, sitting on the sidelines, or actively saying, no, we are not like the Americans, because they don't want to deal with the trouble of having an uprising in their own country. So we're going to get into this article, and I have a few choice words because why not? Now, juxtapose this constant push to make the Muslim world feel at ease, integrated, with the active hatred that is being perpetrated and foisted upon anyone and anything having to do with Christ, Christianity, Jesus, or the faith. Yes, I saw the article of some basketball player that was kicked off a team, professional, one of the big teams. I don't know. It was here in, I think it was the Bulls, the Chicago Bulls. The only thing I know about the Chicago Bulls is that at one point, Jordan played for him. So I'm not a sports guy. Anyone thinks that I'm the prototypical masculine man. I'm not a sports guy. I don't watch football. I don't watch basketball. I don't care what multimillionaires say in regards to their feeling oppressed because they're being told to come to practice. Those things, that's a different class of people that I don't bother with, because if you told them the truth, they'd get angry. You're not being oppressed by being paid $100 million for a 3-year contract. I'm sorry. I know you have to work for it. You have to run up and down a court and throw a ball and hope it hits the basket. I talked to a roofer in Florida in July. Maybe that'll give a bit of perspective. But back to this article, because you need to understand the why of why there's such a rift and a distance between supposed allies, a real and present threat, a very real possibility of their not having the petrol they need because of the Straits of Hormuz. By the way, we talked about that before they shut it down. I know, American prophetic. But you need to understand the correlation here. You need to understand the why of it. And that is when you will begin to see that they know more than they're telling you. And by they, I mean the leaders of these European nations. They understand the danger they've put their own citizens in by allowing this glut of mass migration, because the people that came didn't become French and they didn't become Italian and they didn't become Austrian. They remained Pakistani, they remained Iranian, they remained, I don't know, Iraqi, while living in these places. They did not adopt the culture of the places they migrated to. They made themselves small enclaves that were a mirror image of the places they left. The only difference being is that they get a lot of money from the government for free. And who among us doesn't like free money? Let's be honest. The president of Austria has called for all women to wear headscarves in solidarity with Muslims to fight rampant Islamophobia. You know what? Let's go a step further. I think every Austrian woman should find a man that smells like goat cheese and body odor and ask them politely to punch them in the face. Because if you want the full experience, then you should get the full experience. It shouldn't be just wearing a burqa. It should be living the life of a woman under Muslim authority. I read an article a couple of weeks ago, and we didn't have a chance to talk about it, but it really struck me. There was a young man, he was 19 years old. He was a wrestler in Iran. And a couple of weeks ago, he was hung in public. And the reason for his hanging was because he was found guilty of war against God. Now, his crime, by all accounts, was the fact that he participated in protests a couple of months ago when the Iranian people rose up and, went out into the streets. So this is the mindset that all of the ones that are already gone, the 47 that got taken out in the first day and the handful of others that keep getting picked off, this is the mindset that they had. If you speak against us, if you speak against the regime, you're not debating politics. You are making war against God himself. So 19 years old, wrestling star in Iran, hung by the neck until death in public for making war against God. And I saw another article, another young lady suffered the same fate just a couple of days ago. Her crime, once again, making war against God. So you have to understand that there is a difference of philosophy. There is a difference of mindset between theocratic Muslim nations and what we would deem the Western world. But because so many of them have migrated to places like France and Italy and Austria and England, those currently in power are too cowardly to admit the truth. And so what they're doing is they're encouraging their citizenry to placate an invading force in the hope that that invading force leaves them alone. Let that sink in. If you don't think it's going to happen here, just give it a minute. Because the war right now, and everybody, I know everybody was so relaxed and comfortable and enthused. Ooh, phew, there you go. The Republican Party won, and now all those dangers have been eliminated. No, they haven't. They're still there. They're waiting in the wings. And barring some rabbit being pulled out of a hat within the next couple of months, I do think that the Republicans are going to lose the House. They're going to lose the Senate. We're going to have 2 years of impeachments and congressional hearings. And it's pretty much going to be a repeat of, the last 2 years of 2016, pretty much 2020 to 2024. And we're going to go back to the same place we were, where demands will be placed upon everyone in the majority to placate and go along with the insanity of a minority. I've said this repeatedly, and some of you thought I was joking. There will come a day when you'll get a knock on your door and be asked why you too are not proudly flying an LGBTQIS+++ flag. Because that's the difference in how they use and abuse power. Again, all things being equal, what the big orange man is doing today is what Obama did. It's what Biden did, and nobody went to the Supreme Court about it. Nobody sued. But they play different. That's just the reality we're living in today. The president of Austria has called for all women, indeed, all of you, ladies, to wear headscarves in solidarity with Muslims to fight rampant Islamophobia. I don't see him calling for all the men to wear kippas, even though there is rampant anti-Semitism going on in Europe. But all that aside, Alexander von der Bellen, the left-wing former Green Party leader who narrowly beat a far-right candidate to take office in January, said freedom of expression was a fundamental right, except for if you stand in front of an abortion clinic and pray silently, except for if you preach about Jesus on a street corner, except for if you want to celebrate either the birth or the death, burial, and resurrection of Jesus. Those things are not freedom of expression that are protected by the fundamental right thereof. But hey, all women should put on burqas, even if they don't want to, because, solidarity. It is every woman's right to always dress how she wants. That is my opinion on the matter, he told the audience of school pupils. Go into a mosque and ask any of the women there if it's their right to dress how they want. Enough said. If you want, we can belabor the point. But I doubt that anyone wants to wear a full bodysuit, like a beekeeper's outfit, but in black, where the only thing you see is the eyes, in 100-degree weather. I'm sure that at least some of those ladies would much prefer to have a little ankle showing because of the air and the breeze. But nay. Full body bee suit. And if you don't, guess what happens? You don't get judged by the Austrian government, even if you're living in Austria. You get judged and disciplined by the Muslim court. They have their separate set of laws. This thing is happening even in the U.S. in certain places. There was, I think, well, it has to be Dearborn, Michigan, because, that was the prototype. But there was a father and son that stoned the daughter and sister to death because she'd become too westernized. And citing religious beliefs, I think if memory serves, they were found not guilty of murder. So when there is not one law of the land applicable to everyone across the board, and you allow religious sects and you allow death cults to have a parallel law system that will not acknowledge the law of the land, nor will they consider it supreme above their own, you have yourself a mess. And because the current crop of elected leaders in most countries, save for maybe, I don't know, Hungary and Poland in Europe, are utterly useless, have no backbone, are cowards to the core, they will not defend their own citizens against this encroaching Sharia law. Because that's what it is. Rather, they're encouraging their women to put on burqas. Dress how you want, but make sure it's a burqa. It can't be any bright colors either, because apparently bright colors are offensive to Allah. So it has to be either black or navy. And if you dare to take it off, you're not showing solidarity. Look, I think throwing these terms around, like Islamophobia, is a means of keeping people from expressing what they see in their day-to-day lives. Because I've seen some videos of things that are happening in Paris, of things that are happening in Rome, things that are happening in Vienna. I used to go to Vienna quite frequently. Before the girls came along, that was the stop we made before going back to Romania, because you couldn't find direct flights that were affordable. And you could see the progression, and you could see the separation. There are no-go neighborhoods in Vienna. I've walked through some because I can blend. But if my friend Gino and his pasty face were to walk through one of their neighborhoods, he'd catch a stone or two. So this is happening in what we deem civilized Western nations. Now that will dovetail into the next thing that I wanted to talk about today, because given all that's going on globally, it's something that many may have missed. But there is a case currently before the Supreme Court of these United States regarding birthright citizenship. It seems as though, by all accounts, I've seen some of the snippets of the oral arguments, that it's not going to go the way of the administration. They're not going to do away with the notion of birthright citizenship. And by birthright citizenship, the way it is today, if somebody from anywhere on the planet makes it to U.S. soil while pregnant and they give birth here, then automatically that baby is an American citizen with all the rights an American citizen accrues, and is considered an anchor baby, so the mother has to be able to stay and given legal status based on the fact that the child was born in the United States. How do I put this? I want to be gentle, because look, I've told you before, I'm an immigrant. I came here when I was 9 years old. Both of my brothers were also born in Romania, so I technically don't have a dog in this fight. But if you look at it through the prism of nationalism and globalism, you understand that the people on the side of globalism don't want this idea of birthright citizenship to be repealed in any form or fashion. Because their end result, whether 10 years or now, 20 years or now, or 50 years from now, is a global governance. That's what globalization means. There will be no nations, there will be no borders, there will be one group of people or one individual, because we know he's coming at some point. And no, it's not the big orange man, and evidently it's not King Charles, because he's abdicating and giving it over to his son. But I know, keep Facebooking, keep throwing out. I don't know if this is true, but, and I saw this from somebody that was, I guess supposedly a believer, supposedly rational, who actually put this on their wall. The big orange man is worse than the devil incarnate. So we've gone from Hitler to worse than the devil incarnate. And everyone has a right to their opinion, but you need to understand that there are consequences and unintended consequences when we make this sort of claim. This happened in Wisconsin. I live in Wisconsin. It's a personal sort of thing because it's in my state. It's maybe 40 minutes from here. A Wisconsin woman fatally shot a 61-year-old former coworker for being a Trump supporter. Well, I mean, if you're in league with someone that's worse than the devil incarnate, you kind of deserve it, don't you? 61-year-old Christine Jones was allegedly shot and killed by 31-year-old Diamond Wallace because of Jones's support for President Donald Trump. The Madison Police Department, Madison, Wisconsin, that's the capital of Wisconsin, it's a stone's throw from here, indicated Jones's body was found in a parking garage on Washington Avenue on March 22nd. Police said Jones was headed into work at a Madison hotel when she was shot, and that Wallace, the alleged shooter, used to work with Jones. However, Wallace was terminated last April. Wallace was arrested the day after the shooting, and a gun was recovered from Wallace's apartment. Wallace was described as a former co-worker with a grudge and a political vendetta. The criminal complaint indicts Wallace had expressed animosity towards Jones for being a Trump supporter. You can disagree. You can debate. But when you villainize and vilify one individual to such an extent that you deem them worse than the devil incarnate, by association, anyone who has anything nice to say about someone worse than the devil incarnate can't be that far from being the devil incarnate themselves. People are justifying violence based on political preferences, and it's being fueled from the top down. You have senators and congresspeople saying much the same thing. And it's not because they really believe it. It's because they're not in power. And that rubs them the wrong way. It's because the things that are being uncovered going on at state level is shedding the light on the amount of corruption going on in their individual states. Remember when the whole Minnesota thing blew up and they said it was around $9 billion, the fraud? And I told you, if they ever start digging into what's happening in California and New York, that'll seem like a pittance. Well, wouldn't you know it, another American prophetic confirmed. Currently, the level of fraud in California, just in the healthcare sector, is nearing $185 billion. So to anyone that was clutching their pearls and was all aflutter about soldiers getting a steak and lobster dinner, who said nothing about $185 billion being stolen, siphoned from taxpayer money to go to people that aren't serving in the armed forces, that aren't doing anything but driving $300,000 cars because they have 73 clinics in one apartment that are all getting government funding. Please, I beg of thee. I'll even go King James. I beg of thee, spareth me your sanctimony. I think every soldier that volunteers to go into the armed forces, that volunteers to go to war on behalf of this nation, deserves a steak and lobster dinner at least once a month. I would rather take that $185 million that was defrauded in one state and buy a nice meal for every enlisted soldier in the American Armed Forces. But that's just me, I know. But you don't get it. Oh, I get it. You have to understand that as an immigrant growing up in California, I knew all the grifts. Because I am a Christian, I refused to participate. We had people in the community. We lived in an apartment building that was us Romanians, half Mexican, quarter Vietnamese, some Filipinos. And they were always befuddled as to why my dad worked 2 jobs and why my mom cleaned homes and worked odd jobs to make ends meet when we could have so easily gone after 1 program, 2 programs, 3 programs, or 4. And the answer was very simple. Those programs are reserved for individuals that are unable to work, not for individuals that are unwilling to work. So rather than go and sign up and get benefits, my parents just prayed to God to give them the strength to be able to earn their daily bread. $185 billion. That's not chump change. That's just one state. Granted, it's likely going to be the topper. I think the only one that's going to come close is New York. I think if they start opening up that can of worms, it'll disgust you to no end. So why is this thing going on at the Supreme Court important? At the end of the Constitutional Convention in 1787, I think, there was a lady that asked Benjamin Franklin a question. What have we got? A republic or a monarchy? And because Benjamin Franklin was one of the most intuitive, logical, reasonable, wise individuals to ever held in this country, His answer had teeth. His answer was a republic if you can keep it. I think that the ruling by the Supreme Court regarding this case will go a long way into determining whether we can keep that republic or not. Right now, it looks like it's going to be either a 6-3 or 7-2 vote against ending birthright citizenship. I know people that when they found out they were pregnant, applied for a tourist visa so they could come and give birth in America. Not because they want it to be American, not because they wanted to live the American dream, but because they wanted their child to have dual citizenship, and if they ever felt the need to move here, they could. Just because you're not abusing the system, just because you're not perverting the law, just because you're not exploiting the goodwill and nature of the American people, it doesn't mean no one else is. Because the response to some of the things we're hearing and some of the things that people do, I read snippets of Kristi Noem's husband and that whole thing, and I just what do? You just rub your temples and go, how can this be so insane? If you don't know what I'm talking about, look it up. But yes, Kristi Noem's husband apparently likes the ladies' garments a little too much. And because this sort of thing never crosses your mind, you're aghast. You go, how could this be? I think we need a narrative shift so that we understand just because we don't consider these things, we're not doing these things, it doesn't necessarily mean other people aren't doing them. We live in a fallen world. We live in a wicked world. And every single time one of these stories just bubbles to the surface, and you feel disgust, just understand you're supposed to. You're supposed to feel some kind of way about it. You're not supposed to ignore it and shrug your shoulders and go, oh, well. The natural inclination of the believer is to identify evil and wickedness and be repulsed by it. And this is why this basketball player was fired. Because he was repulsed by obvious wickedness. And that's something that won't go with the other side. They just can't have that. We're paying you millions of dollars. You're supposed to swallow down your repulsion. How dare you say this is sinful? How dare you say the Bible says it's sin and wickedness? We're not just paying you to dribble a ball. We're paying you to validate a lifestyle. We're paying you to shift the mindset of the populace to the point that nothing seems as wicked, nothing seems as sin. And the fact that this basketball player, I don't even know his name, but God bless him anyway, had enough boldness and courage to stand on the truth of the gospel when preachers and pastors and evangelists and televangelists are unwilling to do it, should be a mark of shame for every preacher, evangelist, and televangelist that cannot call sin, sin. Because it wasn't as though it was just bad publicity. He got fired. He lost out on millions of dollars because he stood on principle. It's something that should be celebrated. Not the fact that he was fired, but the fact that he stood on principle. Maybe we could take a page out of his book. Just a thought. Where were we? Oh, here we are. Iran vows humiliation, disgrace, permanent and certain regret for a crushed U.S. after Trump address. Baghdad Bob all over again. Look, you can threaten all you want, but eventually you have to act on your threats, otherwise people will call you. This is why I think we're at a tipping point as far as where we are, because we've delayed continued bombings for 10 days. But when the 10 days are over, given that we gave them 2 days prior, eventually we're either going to have to do something or be labeled the boy who cried wolf. As I said when this whole thing started a month ago, I am not a fan of boots on the ground because that would explode American casualties. The fact that so many other nations have cowed to Muslim pressure, because that's the best way I can put it, in their own countries, that they're distancing themselves from a nation that, all things being equal, again, I like using that term because it's the reality, did away with a great evil. Just goes to tell me that you can't count on any one nation or on any one leader to come to your defense. They were all okay with America being the policeman of the world as long as they didn't have to participate. And the latest back and forth is that the big orange man is considering pulling the U.S. out of NATO. And given how NATO nations have reacted, I don't see why he shouldn't. Because the moment the U.S. air bases in Europe are emptied out and the soldiers come home, I think all of Europe will get a rude awakening. You have to understand that there are many wars and skirmishes being prevented. There are many nations that are just chomping at the bit, waiting for their time to do unspeakable things to their neighbors and not acting out on their desires simply because of the American presence in the region. There's no major nation with a fighting force that's afraid of, I don't know, Kosovo or Montenegro. They're just afraid of the American reaction if they were to do what is their desire to do. If America decides to pull out, that's when you're going to see the true nature of the human condition. Because we can sit on the grass and eat quinoa bask in the sun and have a coexist sticker on our bumper. But the reality is that from the beginning, when Cain decided to brain Abel, because God didn't favor him equally to his brother, mankind has been at war with itself. There's no such thing as utopia while we're still here. There's a reason that portrait of the lion and the lamb sitting together are so powerful. Because we understand how improbable and impossible it seems on its face. We're trying to get the lion and the lamb to sit together while here, and God said, no, it's never going to happen while you're here. But in eternity, it will. You can't make heaven on earth. And with each passing day, it seems as though we're getting closer to hell. We haven't seen anything yet. I know this is how I ended last week's program, and I hope not to today, but here we are. We haven't seen anything yet. And eventually, the reality of the situation and the power plays and how people are positioned and what the intent of their heart is going to become so clear that it'll strip away our sanctimony. It'll strip away our self-righteous attitude. Why can't they just get along? Because nobody's gotten along since after the first 4 people were on this earth. We're getting close to 9 billion. So if 4 people, all of which were related, husband and wife and 2 kids, couldn't get along, and one son brained the other, left him to die in a field, what makes us think we're going to have peace on earth? This is the reality we're living in. I mean, we can sit here and have these pie in the sky discussions. Well, if only. Now, there will be someone who will come along and offer a fake peace. He's close. Not here yet, but he's close. And the world is being prepared psychologically to embrace that one individual who will promise them peace. And wouldn't you know it, the one thing that will stand in the way of peace will be you and I and all those that name the name of Jesus. We will be the only thing standing in the way of utopia. We will be the only thing standing in the way of universal peace. And since we're so willing to murder the innocent in the womb and offer an old lady in Canada whose hip hurt the option of death, what makes you think that your elimination and mine won't just be considered, but acted upon and celebrated? Because in their mind, once you and me are gone, then they can have the peace they've always craved. Huh? See how that works? By the way, if you haven't heard this story, and I'm about to end because we're getting close, there was a lady in Canada who had some sort of hip pain. She went to her doctor, and her doctor said, "We can't do anything about your hip pain, but we can euthanize you." Let that sink in, because I know it starts with baby steps. But eventually, if you and I continue to be stubborn and stand in the way of utopia, wouldn't it just be considered a mercy to just forcibly euthanize us? Once you open certain doors, you can't control the type of monsters that walk through them. And that's the problem. Anyway, thank you all for listening. Thank you for being with us. I think we're getting close. We are. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to Gino. And he will say what he wants to say. And Lord willing, we will see you again next week. God bless.
Hey, thank you, Mike. Well, the word of God is very clear. Wars and rumors of wars. And perilous times will come. 2 Timothy 3. We are not to be shaken or moved by that. Trust in the Lord with all thine heart. We have to acknowledge him in all thy ways. Lean not on our own understanding, and he'll direct our path. So this is the hour to get close to Jesus. It's the week we celebrate his death and resurrection. And remember the great cost that Christ paid on the cross. The more you study it, I'm going through the Bible this year called YouVersion. But the more you study Jesus and what he went through, you almost realize words can hardly express the suffering. And so we have to be thankful this week. We have to remember his suffering. We have to rejoice in his resurrection. It confounded and destroyed the powers of hell and the devil. And it brought hope to everyone ever born that they could have salvation through Christ. That's what John 3 is about. John 3, chapter 3, being born again. And the Lord pardoned a thief on the cross, and one thief basically wasn't convinced he was guilty, but the other thief had remorse and repentance. It's just a amazing thing that even in the worst suffering Jesus endured, he even said, "Father, forgive them. They don't know what they do." I can't fathom not wanting to yell from that cross at those people. Instead, the Lord made the most merciful statement: "Forgive them, for they don't know what they do." Pardon the thief. Even in his worst moments of suffering, he gave someone salvation. He said, "Today you'll be with me in paradise." I just find it all how amazing Jesus' heart, self-control, kindness, wisdom. Through the book of John that I'm going through with some of my guys, you just read all the times they try to trap the Lord. He always answered with extreme wisdom. Read the words of Jesus in the Bible. There's extreme wisdom. Thank you for listening to the Light of Truth radio broadcast. Thank you for listening to today's broadcast, The Light of Truth with Michael Boldea. If you would like to order a copy of today's broadcast, please visit our website at handofhelp.com. If you have questions about our ministry, you can email us at handofhelpoffice@aol.com or simply call us at 920-206-9910. God bless you.
They are all leaving and turning upside down.